Today on Anything is Possible.
When one of the most important things on earth is gone from your life, then sort of life on earth is not quite as important as it used to be.
It was while walking through tragedy that Bill Lee found clarity of purpose.
What becomes important are the things that matter forever. It causes you to think about what parts of your life are not meaningful and what's valuable and what's not, what's worth getting into, what's not. And it becomes much more evident when something like that happens.
Today, part 2 of my conversation with Governor Bill Lee on Anything is Possible. Bill Lee, Governor of Tennessee, thank you for letting us be here with you today. I'm enjoying getting to know you even better now. You described in pretty short order years of pain. And that's one thing I've noticed about possibility people is they move on. They learn to summarize the pain so they can get on to making, something new. And you happen to find love, right?
Yeah. Were
you expecting to find love? Because you had a lot to do.
I hoped to, for sure, but I want to say one thing about what you said about you have pain and move on. You do move on, but you never forget the pain. So it just enhances your ability to move on.
In order for us to see certain things, you have to have contrast. So you start with a white canvas. If you put a white dot on that canvas, you can't see it.
Yeah.
But you put a black dot,
yeah.
The contrast is what makes things pop.
Yeah.
Is pain that kind of contrast that allows you to see and savor life differently?
I think it is. It ends up being a full painting, right, by the end. And to the degree that it has red and black and green and blue and, to the degree that it's all this beautiful thing that includes dark colors, it's all the more interesting and richer. It's a better picture. It really is a better picture. Bitter sweet is a better flavor than just all sweet.
Wow.
It's a richer flavor. But yes, I've found love. I was expecting to. I hoped to. I had a love of my life before, and that person was gone, and I knew that. And I had a lot of love in my life, kids and family and friends, and I had a lot of love in my life. But our capacity to love is not limited by it. So it's not limited. So we can always have more. And I knew Maria even before my first wife passed away. My wife and I both knew Maria. She was my son's teacher, and we met her at a parent-teacher conference. I'd actually met her before, but interacted with my wife and her at a parent-teacher conference. So we were friends, we became friends. She was my kid's teacher the next year, my twin boys. We developed a friendship and relationship, but it was years later that we actually started dating and got married, but I'm deeply grateful to the Lord for a love of my life that is just exactly what I need.
Your face lit up. I mean, you lit up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
she's a great lady. She's a good first lady too. She's a great first lady.
You got it bad, my brother. You got it bad. That's a beautiful thing. Did the tragedy and then the love change what you viewed, your view of success, what success is?
I think it magnifies what matters when you have a struggle in your life. It's one of the ways of redemption. When one of the most important things on earth is gone from your life, then sort of life on earth is not quite as important as it used to be. What becomes important are the things that transcend life on earth, things that matter forever. It causes you to think about what parts of your life are not meaningful and what's valuable and what's not, what's worth getting into, what's not, what should you be spending your time on, and what are you just wasting your time on. And it becomes much more evident when something like that happens. So yeah, it changes you. I got really involved with my kids in mission work and nonprofit work and things that matter. And frankly, it's really what led me to decide to engage in public service, which is something I'd never considered before.
Let's talk about that when we come back. My guest is Bill Lee.
Possibility powered by Pilot Flying J, Covenant Health, Home Federal, and the Knoxville News Sentinel. Coming up.
So considered it and thought, what have I got to lose? What if I don't win? That's okay. And if I win, what a great privilege that would be.
You met a young man that had a transformational impact on you. You started to go and to serve. Yeah. And as we kind of segue into this political life, or this life of public service, let me reframe that, public service. Tell me a little bit of that story.
I did meet a young man. So I had said earlier I got involved in nonprofit work, and I was working through YCAP, which is a part of YMCA, Middle Tennessee, and I met a kid. We had a YCAP lunch. It was for inner city at-risk youth, and we had a girls' lunch and a boys' lunch. And in the boys' lunch, you'd have these young boys meet around a table with a bunch of men in the community that were in different places in the community. And we interviewed these kids. They interviewed us, actually. And I met this kid through this process. He struck me as an unusual young man. He was 12.
Unusual equals?
Well, just he had unusual demeanor to him, and he also asked me a question. He said, "Who's inspired you in your life the most?" And I told him, and I looked at him and I said, "Who's inspired you the most?" And he stared at me for about 5 seconds and then put his head down and started asking me the next question. And I said, "Somebody has inspired you." And he shook his head no. Wow. And I left that lunch. I went to the director of YCAP and I said, "There's a kid in here, that's him, and I want to spend some time with him." So I went home, told my wife, and my daughter, had one daughter left at home then. I said, I'm going to go once a week and spend some time with this kid. So for 5 years, I drove into his very difficult neighborhood, picked him up and spent an evening a week with him almost every week for 5 years. And he had a profound impact on me.
What does he say about the impact you had on him?
We love each other, and we had lunch last week. He's now 21. And we just have a very wonderful relationship that will, I suspect, last the rest of my life.
That is so strong.
It is very strong for me. It's really enhanced my. So you can imagine that here's a kid who his mother was incarcerated when I met him, and he did not know who his father was, and he lived with his grandmother who had some real challenging circumstances of her own, and when I met him, we started hanging out, and it took a while for him to open up. But ultimately, I learned a lot about his life and a lot about life for kids like him. And there's thousands of them in our community. I realized I didn't just happen to pick out the one kid that had that story. And so it actually, I got engaged in his education because I cared a lot about him, of course, and I wanted to make sure he had an opportunity, but I didn't want to take over his life. It wasn't mine to do, and I couldn't. It was one night a week for a few hours, But I got him involved actually in a charter school as opposed to the school he was in, which he was not doing well in at all. In fact, he had an F in every subject when I met him, and I knew he was destined for failure academically. So I put him in, had him, enroll in a charter school, which really had a real different impact on his life. And it just made me a person that became incredibly interested in the education of our children, because I'd really not had to deal with the idea of a good or bad education or the impacts. I hadn't seen it face to face, even though I knew about it, but I hadn't actually seen the impact of someone that I loved and cared about deeply. So it got me involved.
So this will set the stage then, because as we kind of map through your story, now a lot of the stuff you're doing as governor and why you're so passionate about it, it makes perfect sense. But you became governor of the state of Tennessee. How in the world do you make that decision? And it was one of the most expensive, sharp elbows campaigns in the history of the state of Tennessee, and you show up and say, "All shucks, y'all, I would love to be your governor," and win. What?
Don't you love that? "All shucks, y'all"? I did not ever say that. You just interpreted that about me. So,
but now I see what was driving you to say, maybe you could leverage that influence to make life better for all Tennesseans. When did you make the decision, I need to run for governor?
probably, a couple years before I ran. But I had these encounters with things that mattered, and then I knew government could have an impact on education, for example. Mentored men coming out of prison in a reentry program, got involved and saw how the Department of Correction could or could not profoundly impact the budget of the state, the lives of people, incarcerated individuals. Got very involved in that subject and passionate about it. Spent 20 years working, mentoring men coming out of prison. Realized that government can impact that state government can impact that. And if I really wanted to use my life to the fullest degree to impact people's lives for good, this would be one route to do it. It's not the only way to do it or the biggest way to do it. It's just one route to do it. And I had met some people along the way that caused me to think, maybe this path is something I should go after. Prayed about it fervently. Told my wife, I said, I'm going to pray about this every single day this year. And I think by the end of the year, I'll know whether I should do this or not. And I did, and I knew by the end of that year, along with a lot of other due diligence that I did along the way and meeting people and talking to people. So considered it and thought, what have I got to lose? What if I don't win, that's okay. And if I win, what a great privilege that would be.
And you get in the office and you're managing major crisis right out the gate.
Yeah.
You were talking about how long kids were out of school. That passion for education really emerges. You have really taken on mental health. You've really taken on criminal justice reform. Your heart is showing, but you've also managed the state from a fiscal standpoint so well. I mean, I watched you make business decisions with the money and heart decisions with policy, that the net effect of it was people being better and our state being better.
I hope that's the impact that we're having. That's certainly what I wake up hoping to do. We can be fiscally responsible, conservative-minded, freedom-loving people and institute policy that truly does positively impact every single person in the state. I think we can. At least that's the goal that we have.
When we come back, let's talk about the legacy you'd like to leave and what's your vision for the state? Let's talk a little bit about leading through COVID. You love data. You make decisions, not just from your heart. It's got to be smart as well. And I watched you kind of tiptoe through this maze that was COVID. How do I keep the state functional and protect public safety? You and your team started doing those briefings. We were carrying them every day, and you were just like, we're going to focus. But you're coming out of the tragedy of those tornadoes, but it was just focus. And I was glad to have a governor like you.
I appreciate you saying that. I do. I got an engineering degree, so if you're trained in engineering, you you do rely on putting together all the pieces of information you have in order to solve a problem. And that's the way that you're trained to think. And so you use that in every aspect of your life. And I tried to use that process, especially in the beginning of COVID, when you didn't know anything. And there was a lot of anxiety, and there was a lot of projections, and there were a lot of things being said about what's going to happen, but nobody really knew what was going to happen. So you had to make decisions with very little information. Hard to do that. But what we tried to do then was make a decision and then quickly adjust as information came.
Right.
It's one of the reasons I think we were one of the last states to shut down, as it were, stay-at-home orders, and one of the first ones to lift it, because I saw pretty quickly, I followed that information and that data pretty quickly, and I said, this isn't turning out quite like the projections, and until it does, and this idea of shutting down an economy is a very serious thing to do. It was very difficult decision for me to make. Anytime I would close a business, I think, hey, I'm a business guy. What if the government said to me, shut your business down? You better have a pretty darn good reason to tell me to do that. And when we determined that everything isn't exactly as they said it would be, then we made some adjustments quickly. We're one of the first states to open back up. I am a small government guy. I don't think government intervention is good unless it's absolutely necessary. A lot of arguments about what that should be, but it's a reason I didn't mandate masks or keep businesses closed. The reason we tried to keep our schools open. We tried to follow the data and the science and understand exactly where we were, but at the same time recognizing there's a really big picture here that includes livelihoods and businesses and people's jobs and their future and their mental health and their isolation, and it is a very complicated puzzle that required daily discernment while there's a lot of noise going on.
That's the thing I noticed about you. In the middle of the noise, you were able to kind of stay fixed on what your goal was, and you give the nicest no's that I've ever seen. When you have made a decision, you stay firm, but you don't have to be nasty about it. No, we're going to stay right here. What do you want your legacy to be?
I don't even like being asked so much about legacy because it makes it about me. But what do I want to have happened after having been here? It's a little bit like when you get to the end of your life, what do you want to look back at it and see? You'd really like to see that people's lives, and of course you won't touch every person that lives in a state, 7 million people, but on balance, people's lives will be more hopeful. There will be more opportunity. There will, and in that way, their lives will be better. You can't provide a good outcome for everybody that lives anywhere. I can't even provide that for my own children, but I can provide them the hope for a good outcome and the opportunity to have a good outcome. And that's what I hope happens in this state.
The word hope is such a beautiful word.
It's a
One
powerful
definition
word.
is hope is desire accompanied by confident expectation. Right?
Yeah.
Here's what I think will be part of your legacy is this: the style of governance. That being governor of the state of Tennessee is not the next chess move in a political career, but it is a calling in which, on the fiscal side, we make the state run as efficiently and effectively as we can, because that's the platform for hope and opportunity. And on the policy side, we try to build policy that has the highest impact without having damaging impact.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and a couple things you said there. Government isn't the answer. Government doesn't fix anything or provide anything or do anything other than it provides an environment. That's what you want to do here, is create an environment where people have opportunity and hope and believe that they can live their best life, and even better so in this state than they would in other places. You talked about hope, and we talked about tragedy and difficult before. Scripture says suffering produces perseverance, which produces character, which produces hope, which does not disappoint.
Wow.
Because of the love of God. And the connection between the struggles that we all have, which goes to say that even folks in this state who have burdens and trials and things that many of us don't understand, there is still hope, and it doesn't disappoint. If we can create an environment for that hope, and then an environment for opportunity to rise in their life, that's what you want to do for people. If you genuinely, if you love people and you recognize the dignity of every human being, and that every person is created in God's image, and therefore they're just as valuable, every single one of them, as the next one. And that's what is the foundation for policy, I think, that will benefit people.
I'm just thinking about your dad and his whole notion of, I got different kids with different personalities, and every individual matters. I'm thinking about your friend and going, there's something unique about you. You need a chance at inspiration. I'm thinking about recovering from tragedy and understanding that a second or third or 15th chance might be the one that turns you into somebody that is to serve. All of that reeks of hope. And I thank you for letting us be here with you. And I want you to know that I love and appreciate you, and thank you for being a person of possibility.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. It's an honor to be here, and you give people hope. You know that, don't you? So keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you, sir.